It is a huge honor to be here. It's a huge honor to be amongst so many family and friends, and to come to a place that, in many ways, as I said, I really do consider home. And the fact is, what you're doing here is exactly the way that we need to think about policy going forward. Because the idea of doing policy inside of bubbles, or doing policy behind back doors, or doing policy in rooms and thinking about how we can help those people, never has it ever been effective, and never will it ever be effective. And so the fact that we have forums like this, the fact that we can bring people from all walks of life, from all areas and aspects of the community together, to not just talk about the issues, but also talk about doing something about them, is incredibly important. So thank you for your leadership, and thank you again for the invitation. It's also great to be back at Johns Hopkins. Johns Hopkins was a place where, I always like to say, Johns Hopkins didn't teach me how to think, but Johns Hopkins taught me to think. Johns Hopkins taught me to take the information that I've gotten and not just simply regurgitate the information that I got, but actually use that information and come up with a process of what that information means to me, what that information means to the community around me, and how exactly that information can be effective. But I knew that the only way that I could turn this into a book that could not just be something where people would pick it up and say, wow, interesting story, and throw it off to the side, but I wanted to do something that could be a larger call to action. I wanted to do something that wasn't simply an autobiography or a biography, but it's a larger social commentary about the society that we live in, about the society that we create, and what we can do about it. Had it not been for significant and pretty creative intervention, had it not been for people caring about me who had no reason to, had it not been for people who saw more in my life than I even saw in my own life, I know how different the conclusions could have been. I know this, as I say on the cover of the book, is that the chilling truth is that his story could have been mine. And the tragedy is that my story could have been his. When you think about what happened, this idea of humanity, what happened with these two boys is fundamentally you have two boys who were both searching for help and support and positive examples. And one kid got it, and the other kid didn't. And now the world bears witness to the final results of either our attention or our apathy. We all live in an extraordinary city. We all live in a city that is responsible for some of the greatest creations and some of the greatest joys that this country and this world has ever seen. But we also live in a city with extraordinary disparities. We also live in a city, and we call a city home, where you can have the difference between making it and not making it being separated by a block or two. We live in an extraordinary city where the Star-Spangled Banner was written in this city. This city is the home of Thurgood Marshall and the home of Babe Ruth. And we also live in a city where kids are written off every day because of the zip codes that they happen to call home, by the zip codes they happen to be born in. These type of disparities are not just heartbreaking, but these type of disparities strike at the heart of who we hope to be as a people and who we hope to be as a city. Because the fact is, all the greatest ideas, the greatest creations, the greatest thoughts cannot happen if we only have a sliver of our population involved in the conversation. One of the things I'm so inspired by, particularly being here today, is not just being around a whole collection of change agents, not just being around a whole collection of people who are actively doing something about it, but also the fact that we're bringing a bunch of high school students, middle school students here as well, because you all are as part of this solution and part of this, as much a part of this future operations we're talking about. Because the fact is, how we move on doesn't as much depend on us. It really more depends on you. It depends on the hope in the future that you have for the community that you call home. There's a scene in the book when Wes and I are talking, and we're talking about Baltimore, and I was asking him a question. I said, so do you think that we're products of our environment? And Wes looked back at me, and he said, actually, I think we're products of our expectations. And I thought he's absolutely right. We're products of our expectations. Not just the expectations that we have for ourselves, not just the expectations that we have for other people, but also how those expectations become the expectations that we have for ourselves. The question I have is, how do we alter the expectations that we not only have for other communities, but also alter the expectations that communities have of themselves, in order so we can see these amazing ordinary resurrections take place every single day? How do we bring programs that work and actually take them to scale? We all know what a lot of the challenges are. We see challenges all around us. We know challenges of early childhood education, or challenges of graduation rate, challenges of reducing the number of teen pregnancies, challenges of healthcare disparities. We all know what a lot of these challenges are. And many of us even know the solutions to a lot of these challenges because we know what's been working. We know what impacts and effects have actually taken place in communities that have actually been working. So the question becomes, how do we then bring that to scale? The amazing thing about this room in particular is that we've got enough brain capacity in this room alone. We've got enough built-in constituencies in this room alone that if we figured out one problem, there is no doubt in my mind that we could tackle it. If the idea of waiting for other people to figure this stuff out is simply wasting our time, because we can figure this stuff out. We don't need to have titles or job responsibilities or have our name on a ballot to not just identify, but then figure out what are the actionable items that need to take place in order to affect real change within our communities. The beautiful thing is we've got people in this room who are already doing it. So how are we supporting them? We've got teachers and administrators and faculty in this room that are shaping young minds as we speak. How are we aiding them? We've got community leaders in this room right now who have figured out the secret sauce that it takes to actually mobilize and move people. How are we scaling them? We don't need to wait for anybody to figure this stuff out. That's the beauty of humanity. That's the beauty of resilience. Gone are the days when we can wait for other people to figure this out. Because resilience needs to be at the core of solving these solutions. They're not going to be easy. If they're easy, they'd be figured out already. And as I said before, if they're easy, they're probably not worth going after. But they're worth it. Because when you think about the long-term sustainability of our communities, the long-term sustainability of us as a people, it cannot simply be done with a small sliver of people being part of the conversation. Just like this room, which serves as a model as to the way we need to address these issues, everybody needs to be a part of the larger conversation. And an idea of progress, and an idea of resilience, and an idea of humanity has to be at the core of it. Thank you all so much for your time, and thank you so much for your energy and the work that you're doing. Thank you.
What inspired you to write books?
Wow. Good question. What school are you from?
Booker T, Washington. Booker T?
You're from Booker T?
Yes.
Wow. Round of applause to all the Booker T people in the house, man. Good question. Very question. What inspired me to write the book? You know, it's funny. At first, I didn't want to, because I was first approached about it from a friend of mine who's an author who knew I had this relationship with Wes, and she's like, you know, I think there's a larger story here. I think there's almost a greater truth to be understood in this. And I was like, yeah, you know what, but I'm not that interested. I don't have time. I didn't want to look that deeply into his life. I quite honestly didn't want to look that deeply into my own life. And there were a couple real motivations that led me to want to do this. And the first motivation was, it was actually a quote, and I said it earlier, but it was actually a quote by a gentleman named Edmund Burke, when he said, all it takes for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. And I thought about something that Wes told me, because I spoke to Wes about it, and I asked him what he thought, and he said, listen, he said, I've wasted every opportunity I've ever had in life. And if you can do something that can help people understand the consequences for their decisions, and also help people understand the neighborhoods these decisions are being made in, then I think you should do it. So that really then became the motivation for going through with this process. And it's been an amazing process because I've been so humbled by the reaction. You don't realize how your story can be used and hopefully can be used for a common good. And so that's why I like to tell people who are thinking about sharing their stories or thinking about writing, the one piece of advice I give to all people is you must write. You must write your stories. And whether you're writing your stories for yourself, whether you're writing your stories for your family, or whether you're writing your stories for mass distribution, you never know, A, what a feeling is going to be like to explore your life like that. Because as I said, I've probably grown and learned more about myself than I even learned about him. But also at the same time, you never know how that story might touch someone or help someone who needs it right now. So all you young men over at Booker T, I hope that you guys are writing your stories because they need to be shared.
And my question is, if you was living the life of the other Wes Moore, what message would you send out to youth around the world or children if you finally decide to have any?
Great questions. Um, you know what? It's funny about that. I don't even have to speculate on that answer. I know the answer because I've asked him. Wes knows that one of my passions, and I made very clear to the publisher when I put together this book, that if the whole idea of this book was to simply stick me in Barnes & Nobles around the country, then I'm not interested. I really have better things to do with my time than that. If the point is actually to go out and go to schools, community centers, churches, organizations like this, to talk about larger messages and actually be part of a larger solution, that we make sure that this isn't just talk, but that there are actions behind this, then I would be interested in doing that. So when I get a chance to talk to Wes, and I ask him, and he knows that, and I say, so are there things that you want me to share, and particularly with students? Are there things that you want me to share? Because obviously he can't share them. And his answer is actually pretty simple. He says, tell them this is no place you want to be. Wes's day consists of him waking up at 5:30 in the morning. He's then led outside of his cell where each person is counted to maintain accountability, goes and has some breakfast. He'll work a full day. He'll make about 53 cents a day that he then can use in the commissary towards doing things like buying deodorant or stamps. He'll get maybe an hour or two of outside time, which is basically a large pen. And then he'll go back to his cell, and then he'll go to bed. And that has been Wes's day for the past 10 years, and that'll be Wes's day until God decides to take him off the planet. And the amazing thing about that, when you talk to Wes about it, he'll say, and as I'm very clear about, I say that not because I'm trying to create sympathizers, but I say that because the consequences are real. And so the thing that Wes always wants me to share with people as you go out, and particularly as I'm talking to students, is enjoy what you've got and make the decisions that you know are going to actually give you your freedom later on. Because sometimes it's very difficult, as I say in the book, sometimes it's difficult to understand when second chances start becoming last chances. And it's very difficult to see that line because it's very blurry. But the problem is that when we cross over that line, there's no coming back. Because you have lost every sense of freedom. You've lost every sense of who you are. And so that's the message I know he always wants me to share with people.